Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back. We are going to talk about something today that I'm still trying to figure out, to be honest with you. And we've had some great conversations with him about leadership. And that's what he and his company does, fosters leadership, coaching. Got a great book, Arrive, Drive, and Thrive. Today, how to lead without authority. It almost doesn't make sense, but it does when we break it all down, because it comes down to one thing, and that's influence. How to influence people, but still being a leader. I have ideas. I go to the professional on this. He's the man behind Saterman Connect. Josh Saterman out of New York City is back with us. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you, Steve. Doing great. So, influence, that's the topic du jour.
So we know the power with social media of the influencer. It doesn't mean they're an authority on something. They could be talking about pens, and they know nothing or very limited information about pens, but they can influence others to buy this particular pen on its certain qualities. So I look at that, and then I look at a leader that isn't writing on true authority. And I put those two words, I put them in the same category: leader, authoritative, authority. How do you lead without authority using influence?
There's lots of good ways to do that. The first thing to talk about is influence is, especially if I'm using Gallup's Clifton Strengths as a
Mm,
tool, influence is how you speak up, how you share. It might be how you tell a story, or how you present, or how you conversate.
hmm.
And so influencing is part of it is communication. So I'll start there, because influencing is not just one-stop shop. There's no one way to influence. There's also some context. You can influence up, you can influence down, and you can influence across an organization.
Why would you want to influence down?
Well, let's say you have direct reports, and let's say you're trying to accomplish a big strategy. Would you rather have somebody respect you and believe in what you're saying in terms of a strategic direction, or would you rather have somebody tell you what to do, right? And so, in
Mm,
its simplest format, influencing down is all about making sure that you are paying attention to the needs of your organization or the needs of your people, and that requires vulnerable leadership. It requires explaining the why before the what and the how, thanks Simon Sinek. It requires us understanding their communication style, how they like to learn. And I'll pick on the how I like to learn for a minute. I'll call that in and focus on that, because I ask that a lot of my people. How do you like to learn? How do you learn best? You can be a visual learner. You
mm.
can be an experiential learner. You need to see it. You can be an auditory learner. You like to hear it and watch while you're doing it. So there's lots of ways to learn. And you, as a boss, influencing down is understanding how your direct reports, how your junior colleagues like to learn. We'll start there as a big one.
When you first started, call it with your company or in your career, where would you put that? Would you say that you became an influencer where you are already like out of the gate in that category?
Well, sure. I mean, listen, we have to take one safe assumption for today's call, and that is that our bosses, or our leaders, or our managers, leadership and management is different. We'll talk about that in a second also. But leadership and management aside, the truth is that your individual boss, let's assume that they are decent. We'll talk about the assholes later, but that's not for right this
Now
moment.
hold on. I got you on that. But when we use the word decent, are we talking about a decent human being or a decent manager leader?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough.
Yes, all things, right? Let's assume that we're human, right? And so bosses make mistakes. So we're not here to say that, your leaders are perfect. And that's why we're on this journey together, is that we're getting better every day. So
Hmm.
just taking that pause, when I first became part of the workforce, It was sort of like a family. This is one thing I'll use as an analogy. I don't typically call teams family. They're teams. Uh, However, you look out into the world of managers and leaders, whether they're your direct supervisor, your direct senior executive, your direct, and you start to compare and contrast who's talking to who, which ways, how are they sharing information. So first and foremost is you're learning. As long as you're listening with your eyes, you're learning. And the reason I say that is because you still have learned and lived experience. When we're in the workforce or workplace, we're also looking at the marketplace. And let me just share a little bit more detail so that the language is common language for everyone listening to today's podcast. Workforce is our internal employees. Workplace is our internal environments. And marketplace is our external environments. It can be client, it can be patient, it can be customer, it can be community, right? So when we influence, what we're doing is we're sharing, again, go back to where I started, we're sharing our voice. And that doesn't have to be always verbal, it can be written, but nonetheless, it's voice. So when I first graduated, I had a perspective because I was a 21, 22-year-old consumer. I
Mm.
wanted to buy things, or I wanted to have a good experience, or I wanted to share something with friends and loved ones and have them be motivated to join and be part of the conversation. So, right, for me, it was retail. It can be medical practice. It can be manufacturing a product. It can be CPG, consumer product goods. It can be biotech. I learned this in school. I had this case study. So absolutely, as an emerging leader, part of the Arrive, Drive, and Thrive, the Arrive portion of our leadership development work is all about emerging, evolving, rising leaders. And absolutely, there's voice in that.
I want to share with you that I looked at my Clifton strengths and now
Ah,
I see it's been a while. It's been exactly a year since I did them within a couple of days. And now I see where you're going with this because having not looked at them in quite some time, I scan through them. And I'm looking for influencer as one of the strengths, one of the 34. I don't see it, but then I realize, oh no, influencer is connected to your strengths, and they put it's an orange icon box next to it.
yeah, yeah,
And for me, number one is strength is communication. That's an influencer. I
that's
didn't,
right.
I didn't see it that way. If you go down to number four, it's got the orange tab next to it, meaning influencer. And my number four strength is maximizer, whatever that is. Got to look that up. Um, and, and then you pivot down to 11, which is woo. Got to look that one up too. I forget. But that is also influencer. And there's a bunch of other ones that come under the category of an influencer: positivity, activator, competition, things like that. So
That's right.
I
I'm
see it in a different
impressed.
light. I see it in a different
Steve,
light now.
Steve, I am super impressed. Nice work. I
I'm trying
love that.
with your
I
help.
love
I'm
that.
trying to figure this all out.
Well,
Um,
here's the Cliff Notes version for the audience, right?
sure.
Essentially, there are four key domains. Every assessment has their what I would call shtick. Um, but the reality is that these are tools for us. It's not gospel, it's guidance. What I love about Gallup Clifton Strengths is there is a 1 in 33 million chance that your top five talent themes will be the same as somebody else's.
Mm,
So essentially, there are four domains: relationship building,
wait.
influencing, executing, and thinking. They call it strategic thinking, but in essence, thinking, how you absorb information, how you build relationships, how you get things done, and how you move the dial, how you speak up, how you influence a room, how you share. Okay. And in this way, what then we look at is the 34 talent themes, net neutral, not good, not bad, not right, not wrong, for those who are able. All people have the same 34 talent themes or muscles. And so think of those four domains as muscle groups: arms, legs,
Mhm.
abs,
Gotcha.
right? And it's this mix of muscles that allows our how we get things done, how we move the dial, how we build relationships, how we think. It allows us to be unique in that way. So I love Gallup Clifton Strength. It allows the individual to shine through in the context of a team. Where do we have team dynamics? So there is no well-rounded team. What there is culture add, right? What we're looking for with Gallup Clifton Strengths is the mix of it all and how we show up within that mix so that what we bring as individuals is our key strengths, and we amplify those talent themes to make them into our strengths. So in Gallup Clifton Strengths language, which I love, a talent theme is a strength when you refine and build it, like going to the gym. And when that best talent theme in your top 10 is being underutilized or not built out, that serves as your weakness. That serves as your anchor because those are your innate abilities. So when you talk about Woo at 11, winning others over, or you
Mm,
talk about maximizer, this concept of excellence, not perfection, but doing the best work you can do. And you know when you haven't delivered your best work. Or
100%.
when you talk about communication, right? Speaking thoughts into words with ease, being very comfortable presenting and sharing information and sharing tools. You're an amazing podcaster, Steve Harper. And it makes sense. It makes sense that communication and maximizer would show up for you in that context, right? So while we don't um, project what we think someone's strengths are on them, what we can do is once we take the assessment is learn how they communicate best or how they get things done or in what ways they process data or how they like to build deep meaningful relationships. And what this does for us is allows us to go back to what I said, whether it's an emerging leader or a rising leader, whether it's an advancing leader or someone that's been in place for a while, existing management, right, in terms of what that looks like, or senior executives, right? I always say, as high as a person sits, a person still sits on their ass. So these tools are meant to guide us, whether it's Myers-Briggs or DISC or Hogan or Gallup-Clifton Strengths
Mhm.
or Insights. We're certified in about 15 different assessments. They're tools. They're tools to get to know yourself, your organization, and how you work more powerfully within those constructs.
In the last 60 seconds, I learned more about the Gallup Clifton strengths than I did in the past year of looking into it and disc assessment. Funny you should say that. The reason I did the Clifton strengths a year ago, it was a retreat for the Girl Scouts. I'm on the board, and that was
Nice.
kind of the thing that they wanted to do. The retreat is coming up in 2 weeks, the yearly retreat. And what we're going to do is look at the Clifton strengths and how we can pair, not compare, but pair people with others in certain areas so we can, achieve better goals.
Yeah.
And we're also going to do a disc assessment at that retreat. So
You are speaking my language,
I,
Steve.
I guess
So these
now it's like I'm learning
these are
this.
called they're called power pairs. They're actually, it's a really amazing tool, power pairs, and that's essentially,
Yeah.
how do your talent themes and somebody else's come together, and in that way we net weave. We weave the team strengths together so we can maximize our overarching results. So I love this for you. This is very exciting. I can't wait to actually
I'm more
catch up and hear
excited.
more about it.
I'm talking to you now. I'm more excited about it, and I would even love to look. I was on the board development committee for 2 years, and
Yeah.
and it's a 2 year run, so I'm just about at the end of that. But we got a lot done. I would love to look at everybody's strength assessments in that team and
Yeah.
see now when there are these pairs. Are there similar strengths? Like, for example, let's say you're in a group of four people. Seems like everybody's getting it done. Would they have, like in their top 10 strengths, a lot of similarity?
Maybe. It's again, it's hard to project. Sometimes birds of a feather do flock together. It's usual for us as humans to either hire or surround ourselves with people that think, act, process, do like us.
Hmm.
We look for that camaraderie in that sense. That's why I used the word before, culture add. Here in organizations, how do we hire into culture fit? Will they fit our culture? And what I say is the table keeps expanding. You don't have to worry about finding exactly the right number of seats at a table of eight. Make the table 10, make it 12, make it 14, right? If you're in growth mindset, thanks to Carol Dweck, continuous improvement, continuous learning also means you can expand. So
Mm.
why I say that is when I'm building teams or when I'm working with senior executives and boards to try to maximize high performance within a team, part of the way, so let's talk about influencing up, right? Part of the ways we influence up is we call to attention when we have employees or we have talent in the organization that are capable of more. That's what we call special projects. When done
Mm.
right, what that's doing is it's expanding the leadership, it's expanding the experience of our people, wherever they sit within that leadership journey. You can expand an assistant, you can expand a manager, you can expand a director, you can expand a CEO, right? And
Hmm.
so if you're any of those CEOs that are sitting out there and you're like, I've never done Series A funding, or it's my first time being a CEO, I haven't had as much board experience as I want, or right, these are ways to what I would call expand. So we talk about culture add. We're talking about doing exactly what you just talked about. How do we maximize our power pairs so we can learn from each other more powerfully and tap into that knowledge so that we can learn and grow?
Totally. Totally. And you want to be with people that are going to be, I'm careful to say on your level, but have the same mentality when it comes to getting things done, strategies, thinking. Let's go to influencer or how to lead with influence, because I have a visual of a company and maybe one person, they're not a leader, maybe they don't want to be. They're just doing their thing, but everybody respects them. Everybody loves their energy keyword. Everybody just gets a good vibe from them. Just,
Yeah.
they want to follow this person because they're kind of cool. Nobody can figure out why, but they got something going on and they make a suggestion. Most people say, wow, yeah, we didn't think of it that way. Is that essentially an influencer?
Well, it's an example of a type of influencing, right? I love that you just went there because sometimes we think of influencing as the one that's the loudest or the one that's speaking the most or the one that
Mm,
says that powerful question at the end of the conversation. And there is leadership in that. There's influencing in that. Leadership and influencing are two different things, though.
yep.
Sometimes when I'm in the room, I'm looking and I'm listening for the person that's the quietest.
Hmm.
I might even after the meeting say, hey, I noticed that you were quiet. Talk to me about how you learn. Talk to me about how you like to contribute in meetings. Talk to me about what feels good for you or comfortable because you were really processing. Sometimes I'll say you have thoughtful eyes. It makes people
Wow.
very uncomfortable sometimes. I have to be
It
careful
could
when
be
I use
could be
that.
could be creepy.
It's a
Like
little
you
creepy. It's a little
yeah.
creepy. But if you're listening with your eyes, you're watching. And sometimes you can just see someone is just they're absorbing through their eyes. I want to know what they're thinking, even if they're not comfortable speaking up in a group setting. I want to work on that. I want to work on the ways to make them feel like they can contribute and add value. And that's influencing, right? And so I don't want it to become a catch-all. That's not the purpose of diving deep into this topic today. It's to give permission that somebody in the room might be saying, well, I'm an introvert. So I'm not sure that I'm going to influence the room. And that's bullshit. Sometimes our influencers are most powerfully are introverts because they're introspective. They're actually maximizing their full brain power versus their vocal cord power. And in that, there's knowledge, there's experience, there's thoughtfulness. So not
Hmm.
everybody has to be the same in terms of one influencing model. And there is a magnetic field sometimes that you will feel for someone that you gravitate towards their communication style or their thinking style, right?
Yep.
And in that way, there is an element of influencing that's happening in that moment.
There's the energy.
Yeah, there's a vibe. I mean, I
Yeah.
like the words you used earlier. I mean, I find different vibes with different people, and if you're listening, you'll feel that difference of vibration. It doesn't make one better or worse. It just makes you more in tune with what's happening around you. And if your energy is too frenetic, if your energy is too staccato, if your energy is not ears open, eyes open, you miss that vibration. Does that make sense?
100%. And I feel in my journey of learning energy and the vibration. What is energy? It's a vibration. You use that word. I feel we only have so much. So when people call upon you, they're taking your energy, you're giving your energy. And to your point, some people just talk a lot and they're putting on a show. That's fine. And that's them. That's the way they're wired. But the introverts may have so much going on there. They're using all their energy to absorb, process. Call them geniuses in some regards because they're just leaning back. They don't have to ride on the get in your face, make a lot of noise. They could be an influencer, but a quiet one. Just a everybody's wired differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
I want to sort of On that note, everyone's wired differently. I want to pivot to something. One of the areas I hear the most about within influencing is influencing up. So I want to really focus for a moment on those managers, directors, vice presidents, even SVPs who are reporting into a higher structure. Doesn't matter, manager to director, director to VP, director to senior director, doesn't matter. But let's talk about that for a minute because one of the most powerful tools I learned in influencing was that people in the corporate space, whether it's nonprofit, doesn't matter, people don't like to be wrong. It's a little silly because we're human, right? So we make mistakes, but there's a difference between making mistakes and being wrong. And so I share this story with you. I was
Hmm.
working with a senior executive, very senior executive, who reported into a very senior executive. And they were struggling to make progress on sharing with this person the different ways to look at something, the different lenses or perspectives. And I asked them in our coaching within their own style to consider what it would look like to educate them versus change their mind.
Hmm.
Educate them versus change their mind. I said, how do they learn best? How do they learn, right? And one of the ways that we can teach our senior executives managing up is by demonstrating something. Most times you get to a certain level of leadership, VP, SVP, CEO, and you've had a tremendous amount of experience, but you haven't had all experiences. And I don't use the word but often, but you haven't had all experiences. And what that requires us to do is listen differently. Sometimes that's hard. So we coach around this idea of demonstration, right? Bringing proactively, hey, Steve, I'd like to share something with you. I'm working on something. I'd like to show you how it looks. I'd like to show you what I'm doing from a behavior standpoint with my team, how I'm leading staff meetings differently, how I'm writing a strategic direction differently, how I'm engaging my team through Gallup Clifton strengths differently. And what you're doing is you're helping, you're supporting, you're navigating, you're building those connections for your senior leader. And in that way, those senior leaders that might have a sightless spot within their journey, now you've turned that dimmer switch from dark to bright. You've actually demonstrated for them the how. Struggle with, I don't know how to do this. And at that level of leadership, we need to teach them differently. We need to educate a little bit differently so that their learnings are not embarrassing. Their learnings are filled with growth mindset and access.
I love it. I'm learning so much today. I really, really am. And I'm seeing this in a whole different light. That, in terms of how to, I didn't even know where we are going to go with this. Honestly, how somebody who can influence can lead. I had a loose idea, but now it's crystal clear.
My mother always said, communicate with people the way they want to hear the information, not the way you want to tell them the information.
So what is it? What is that? I had this conversation with somebody last night, pretty deep one. The five love languages. What you're
Yeah.
saying is kind of in that territory because what do? We treat others the way we want to be treated. So five love languages, use it as an example. If you are somebody that likes signs of affection and words of affirmation, and you give that to somebody else, but they like acts of service and gifts, it's not going to work. And that's how we do it. We and with good reason treat others as they, as you want to be treated. But that doesn't
Yeah.
really work in those situations where you need to, I guess, need to be proficient at reading people, what they need, or ask them.
Well, like the five love languages, there are 3 to 5, I would say, tips or considerations for the audience, right?
Hmm.
Number one is leadership is not reserved for title. We've talked in a previous podcast that leadership is different than management. Leadership is about sharing information and having environments where information sharing is appropriate. So, for those cultures out there that are not embracing their values or their values are not reflecting their organization, look at your values, right? Because this is how we behave, agnostic of title. And managers, again, management is about decision making. It's not power or authority, but rather management is about where do we have decisions and possibility to make decisions. Leadership is agnostic. It's not reserved for the top. Influencing is essentially the ability to share, the ability to make sure people are feeling heard, are heard, right? Others are heard, right? Fill in the blank. And I share that because that is such a powerful way for us to change our mindset around the way that we show up in the work. And that's why we say the art of managing up,
Hmm.
right? The skill set of managing down and across, right? These are absolutely ways that leaders can establish trust, set clear expectations, inspire action, right? They can fill in gaps where gaps are. So think about Gallup Clifton Strengths in our conversation today, right? Where are there gaps on influencing or gaps in relationship building, and how do we fill in those gaps? These are ways that we influence every day.
Now I get even a clearer picture of your concept: arrive, drive, and thrive,
Mm,
which I think
yeah,
maybe next time we should get deeper into, because those words are coming even clearer in terms of moving things forward, leveling up
yeah,
potentially.
yeah.
This is what you do, and your team. How do we find you? How do we connect with you, Josh?
SatermanConnect.com, Saterman, connect.com. Instagram, LinkedIn, follow us, contact us. We love to meet new folks. And so arrive as an emerging or rising leader, drive as an advancing and growing leader, and thrive as a senior leader at an organization. That's our cliffhanger for our next time together.
You make all this not just fun, but exciting.
Thank you. Thank you so
Seriously,
much.
like I'm jacked up for that retreat with the disc assessment, and to take what I've learned today to that team, because I'm going to look at people differently, but in a very positive way in terms of how we can
Yeah.
all work together and be more efficient. Thank you very much for today. Really cool.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.